Coming up on The World Today. Flights cancelled in the United States owing to the winter storm. We'll take a look at the fallout of the China-US relations and a fallout of the Epstein files. Welcome again, everyone. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos. A powerful winter storm has battered the U.S. East Coast, dumping record-breaking snow and bringing major cities to a near standstill. The so-called no-Easter blanketed parts of the Rhode Island and Massachusetts with nearly 1 meter of snow, making it the worst snowstorm in Rhode Island's history. New York City Central Park recorded more than 19 inches. More than 600,000 homes and businesses lost power, while over 5,700 flights were cancelled nationwide. Airports in New York, including JFK, were among the hardest hit. Several states imposed travel bans as whiteout conditions made roads treacherous. In Massachusetts, the severity of the storm forced the Boston Globe to suspend print publication for the first time in its 153-year history. Forecasters say the storm is now moving towards eastern Canada, though strong winds and dangerous conditions are expected to persist. More from the United States House Committee on Appropriations and Foreign Affairs has formally submitted report to the White House outlining their findings and recommendations on the alleged persecution of Christians in Nigeria. The reports recommended sanctions and visa restrictions against individuals and groups responsible for or complicit in religious persecution. The submission follows President Donald Trump's decision to redesignate Nigeria as a country of particular concern. He had directed Congressman Riley Moore and Chairman of the House Appropriations Committee, Tom Cole, to lead a comprehensive investigation into the reported persecution of Christian communities by terrorists, as well as the broader security challenges confronting Nigeria. As global power competition intensifies, China's expanding footprint across Africa is drawing renewed scrutiny. With deep trade and investment ties spanning infrastructure, technology, and energy, Beijing is increasingly being asked how it views its security responsibilities on a continent where its economic interests are firmly embedded. At a forum largely shaped by Western security concerns, a leading Chinese security scholar is offering Beijing's perspective on the evolving global order and the shifting balance of influence between major powers. Meanwhile, African nations continue to navigate partnerships with both China and Western countries, weighing competing offers on development financing, debt sustainability, and strategic cooperation. Now let's examine how China defines its role in Africa and how it positions its engagements differently from that of the West. Joining us now is Zhu Bo, a senior fellow, Center for International Security and Strategy, Tsinghua University. Great to have you on the program, Bo. Now, China has significant trade and investment relationships across Africa. How does Beijing assess its security responsibilities on a continent where it has deep economic interests?
Well, actually, China had a very good relationship with African countries. In fact, China has contributed a lot, even to the independence of many African countries. And after independence, and even through this process of independence, China has actually even provided military assistance to many African countries, which helps them to win independence. So I think China's relationship with Africa is multidimensional. So of course, politically speaking, China's relationship with African countries is always good in that this is a good example of South cooperation, and economically speaking, because China can actually provide a lot of help, assistance to African country in terms of infrastructure, which is badly needed in Africa. So I think China can also play a huge role in this regard. And Africa is becoming important, because Africa is the least developed, so therefore it probably could have the largest potential. And in decades to come, Africa's population will grow tremendously, and this world will change a lot because of Africa. And because of China's important position in the world, I think there is a great potential for both sides to cooperate.
Well, at a forum focused on Western security concerns, what perspective does a Chinese security scholar bring to discussions about the global order?
Well, the global order certainly is going through profound changes, with fewer people believing or even talking about the liberal international order. But I believe this order cannot be simply taken as a kind of Western-dominated international order. People always make a mistake on this, because I believe in terms of the rules and regimes after the Cold War, they are indeed built by the Western countries. But these rules and regimes are basically found in the economic field. They're part of the international order, but they are not themselves, the international order. Because international order is something bigger, something more sophisticated. It should include different, social system, national identity, culture, and above all, different civilizations.
African countries are navigating relationships with both China and Western nations on infrastructure, technology, and debt. How does China distinguish its offer from what the West provides or offers?
That's very easy for me to answer, because I think talking about Americans' proposals, most of the time they would just, give a lesson to Africans, and sometimes they talk about some proposals, but there are actually not so many proposals, and none of them is really working. So who is still talking like Joe Biden's Build Back Better, or this so-called IMEC, India, Middle East, Europe corridor? It will take a long time, and who is going to invest? Huge sum of money. So in comparison, China's BRI is a solid project in which China has invested at least $1 trillion. So this is visible, and it sprawl across the globe. I believe the purpose, of course, is to enhance the infrastructure of all the countries concerned. In that regard, China's capabilities that are next to none in terms of infrastructure could be tremendously helpful.
Bo, thanks again. Let's get back to our top story. A powerful winter storm has battered the U.S. East Coast, dumping record-breaking snow and bringing major cities to a near standstill. The so-called nor'easter blanketed parts of Rhode Island and Massachusetts with nearly 1 meter of snow, making it the worst snowstorm in Rhode Island's history. New York City's Central Park recorded more than 19 inches. More than 600,000 homes and businesses lost power, while over 5,700 flights were cancelled. Nationwide, airports in New York, including JFK, were among the hardest hit. Several states imposed travel bans as whiteout conditions made roads treacherous in Massachusetts. The severity of the storm forced the Boston Globe to suspend print publication for the first time in its 153-year history. Forecasters say the storm is now moving towards eastern Canada, though strong winds and dangerous conditions are expected to persist. Let's get more on this. Our Washington, D.C. correspondent Maria Bird joins me now. Maria, how treacherous is this? Is it much more than we're reporting? How significant is this weather compared to previous major winter storms along the U.S. East Coast, particularly in states like Rhode Island and Massachusetts?
It's very clear that global warming is having a major impact on the U.S. and obviously on the entire world. But as we look at this winter has been one of the most treacherous winters that we've seen in recent history. As you mentioned, Rhode Island, they've seen more snow than they've ever seen in the history of the state. And so that goes to show you that we are in unprecedented and new territory. When you're talking about potentially 3 feet of snow is what they're estimating. That is, it's enormous amount of snow to be able to push and move through, which has really crippled the region and that New England region. New York has seen some of the greatest levels of snows in recent history. Not the record breaking, but it is definitely what they have not seen in over 20 years. They're seeing about 2 feet of snow in New York City, and it has crippled the transportation industry. Obviously, in New York, public transportation is a huge a piece of the everyday life of New Yorkers. And so the Long Island Railroad is just beginning to go back into operations this morning. The other bus systems are taking their time. Some of them are not able to get to various stops. And so it is really having a major impact on the entire eastern region. Philadelphia has been challenged as well. As you get a little bit further down, Washington had minimal snow in comparison. So it was not crippling. It did just have about a day of interruption in the Washington area. But this has been quite a challenging winter season.
And with more than 600,000 power outages and thousands of cancelled flights, how are federal and state authorities coordinating emergency response?
Well, one of the things that's very unfortunate during these types of extreme weather conditions is those who are vulnerable. Specifically, you think about the homeless communities who oftentimes don't have places to go. Obviously, shelters are opening up more beds and trying to find places for them. The elderly who oftentimes don't have the appropriate, winterization on their homes and might not have the ability to have resources to get everything they need inside. And so this becomes a real challenge. And as you mentioned, even for emergency response. So if anyone has a medical emergency, that becomes even greater challenge to get to them and get them to a local hospital. And with the power outages, that does bring another level of concern because that does potentially put heat at risk. Obviously, you need electricity for a variety of things throughout the day. And so it just puts so many in just such grave and dangerous situations. So at this time, it's really the focus is on just restoring power and really getting people to a point where they're safe and secure, and also encouraging them to not go out unless it's absolutely necessary.
And what has been the economic impact so far, especially with major transport hubs like the airports affected, of course, and businesses also have been shut?
Yes, this has had a large impact on the economy. As we know, people going out to stores, restaurants is all a part of the economic ecosystem. And so obviously this has put a damper on that. Even people getting the resources they need. So grocery stores are not as fully stocked because they're not able to get the types of goods in. So this will have a long-term impact, which is why you see many of the governors have established state of emergency. It's not just for the safety parameters, it's also for the economic challenges that the state will experience as a result of these type of crises.
And governors imposed travel bans. We've talked about that in several states. How effective were these measures in limiting accidents and protecting emergency services?
It appears as if, if you think about the gravity of these storms, we have not seen the level of tragedy that could have been the case. And so it seems that people took heed to those guidance and those travel bans and have tried to stay home and to avoid the streets during this time. So it appears as if they are actually working as they are obviously actively trying to clear roads and clear streets to ensure people are able to safely travel once the weather becomes permissible.
And as the storm moves east towards eastern Canada, what lingering risks remain for those communities already buried under record snowfall?
Well, the hope is that the temperatures raise, and so you don't have extreme cold temperatures. If the temperatures continue to raise and we get above freezing, you'll begin to see melting, which will allow people to get out a little bit faster, and it will also reduce the level of risk. And so, as you mentioned, them being buried under extreme amounts of snow, with temperatures becoming a little bit higher, that will help to decrease some of the safety and health risks.
Maria, before I let you go, one more thing. Restrictions are to be placed on certain Nigerians who the Trump administration determines are, meddling or, part of the persecution of Christians. That report was out today from the U.S. Congress. Could you tell us just a little bit more about that? What does this mean?
Well, there's been a very clear, we know that the U.S. has put troops on the ground, which is not normal for the United States to actually go into a country and to provide that level of interest there. We've known the president has been stating ever since he identified Nigeria as a country of particular concern that he was focused on Christian persecution. We also note that the administration has not fully looked at, but they have somewhat addressed the fact that it's not only Christians, but the focal point obviously is on Christians. The Congress has made a report that they have made recommendations to the White House. How the president responds to that, I think, is going to really give a idea as to how the U.S. plans to move forward with their U.S.-Nigeria relations. Many are a bit concerned about who these individuals could be, who could be targeted in this measure. We know the president has been very clear about his focus on security, but the real question is, as it relates to security, what is going to be the potential aftermath and outpouring of this, especially as strong as the Nigerian community is here in the United States. And so I think that we will begin to see over the next few days how these recommendations will be implemented by the White House.
Maria, thanks again. Millions of people in Ukraine are struggling without electricity, heating, and basic services as damage to the country's energy infrastructure continues to take a devastating toll nearly 4 years after Russia's full-scale invasion. According to UN Women, 65% of Ukraine's power generation capacity has been destroyed, leaving families exposed to freezing winter conditions and widespread hardship. Officials warn the crisis is having a particularly severe impact on women, affecting their safety, employment, and access to essential services, while prolonged blackouts continue to disrupt daily life. Humanitarian agencies say women-led support organizations are now at a risk of shutting down due to major funding cuts, threatening critical assistance for thousands of vulnerable people. Aid groups warn that without urgent support, the humanitarian situation could worsen significantly in the coming months.
The 24th of February 2022, more than 5,000 women and girls have been killed and 14,000 injured, with 2025 being the deadliest year yet, and the real toll likely far higher, with 65% of the country's energy generation capacity destroyed by deliberate attacks. Families are left without heating, electricity, and reliable shelter, especially during those brutal winter conditions. And those energy blackouts, they are not just technical disruptions. They directly undermine women's safety, protection, and economic security. Extended darkness, lack of street lighting, non-functioning elevators, and disrupted transport severely restrict women's mobility and increase exposure to harassment and accidents. In Kiev, in a heated tent that had been set up to support citizens across the street, I met with Irina, and she told me, no electricity means no school for my children. And no electricity means no job for me. It means no salary.
1 in 3 women-led organizations surveyed warned that they may not survive beyond 6 months under current funding levels. Due to the funding reductions in 2025 and 2026, organizations in Ukraine are projected to lose at least $53.9 million by the end of the year.
The energy crisis is a humanitarian crisis. When the power goes out, generators allow for some of us to continue working, but they cannot power every apartment, every stove, every radiator, or every elevator. It is often the most vulnerable who carry the consequences. For older people, people with disabilities, and those with chronic illnesses, this is life-threatening.
Attacks on healthcare are widespread and severe in Ukraine. WHO has verified more than 2,870 confirmed attacks, resulting in 233 deaths and 937 injuries among healthcare workers and patients. Facilities operate beyond surge capacity with the workforce depleted and infrastructure damaged. So since February 2022, so since the 4 years alone, 390,000, nearly 400,000 disabilities were added, which could be attributed to the war. But the figures alone don't do it, because it's the support that is missing, the freedom of movement for people, the lack of supplies, the lack of any support necessary to support people with disabilities is decreasing. So the numbers are one thing, the story behind it are a much bigger one.
Politician Lord Mandelson has been released on bail after being arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. London's Metropolitan Police confirmed the 72-year-old was detained and questioned before being released pending further investigation. The arrest is linked to allegations that Lord Mandelson shared sensitive government information with convicted offender Jeffrey Epstein while serving as a government minister. Police carried out searches at properties in Camden and Wiltshire as part of the ongoing investigation. Lord Mandelson has not publicly commented on the allegations, and inquiries are continuing. And here in Nigeria, the country's anti-trafficking agency, the National Agency for the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, NAPTIP, in partnership with the British High Commission in Abuja, has facilitated the safe rescue and return of 23 Nigerians who were trafficked to a cyber fraud scam centers across Southeast Asia in coordinated international cooperation aimed at dismantling trafficking networks and supporting victims' recovery and reintegration. The victims, who were lured abroad with fake job offers and later trapped in exploitative scam operations in countries including Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, and Thailand, were successfully repatriated following joint interventions involving Nigerian and international partners. And that's the world today. Thank you for watching. I'm Joker Rogers.